This story is titled, I'm excluded from family trips because I have a different dad from my brothers. Now they're suddenly nice after learning my uncle controls internships worth millions. They never saw the setup coming. Before I get into the meat of this mess of a show, you need to know some background. So, I'm a 16-year-old dude, male, and I've got these 3 half-brothers, Liam and Noah, 18-year-old twins, and Owen, 16 male. We've got the same mom but different dads. Their dad is super involved in their lives. They stay with him every other week, and he takes them on all these awesome trips. Last year alone, they went to California, some crazy hiking trip in Colorado, and even freaking Japan. Meanwhile, my dad? Total ghost guy. Left when I was a baby, and I haven't heard from him since not even a birthday card. Nothing. I wouldn't care so much about all that if my brothers weren't such jerks about it. Like, they're not horrible to me or anything. They don't beat me up or call me names. It's worse than that. They basically act like I don't exist most of the time. They've got their little group, their inside jokes, their whole brother thing going on, and I'm just not part of it. I've got friends at school who have older brothers who actually look out for them, teach them stuff, hang out with them. Mine? They'll walk right past me in the hallway at school like they don't even know me. My mom doesn't help either. She works a lot, and when she's home, she's always tired or busy with her own stuff. I get it. She's doing her best, but she never seems to notice how my brothers treat me. Or maybe she notices and just doesn't know what to do about it. Either way, it sucks. The only person who actually gives a damn about me is my Uncle Mark, my mom's brother. Ever since I was little, when my brothers go to their dads for the weekend, I'd stay with Uncle Mark. He's got this sweet apartment in the city, and he's just a cool dude. He works in tech or something, makes good money, but doesn't act all superior about it. One of our things is going to basketball games together. He got me into the sport when I was like 10, and now I'm a legit fan, collect the cards, know all the stats, it's the whole deal. My brothers couldn't care less about basketball, as far as I know. I've definitely never seen them watch a game. So, a few weeks ago, Uncle Mark tells me he's got tickets to this huge playoff game in Chicago, not just any tickets either, like really good seats, and he wants to take me. Just him and me, fly out to Chicago for the weekend, stay in a nice hotel, see the game. I was so stoked, I couldn't even sleep that night. This would be my first time on a plane. First time staying in a real hotel, first pro basketball game. I kept imagining how jealous my brothers would be when they found out. Then the universe decided to take a giant dump on my plans. See, my brothers were supposed to be at their dad's place that weekend, but their dad suddenly had to go on some last-minute business trip, so they'd be staying home with us instead. And Uncle Mark, being the fair guy he is, decided that meant he should invite them to Chicago too. He told me a few days before the trip, "Hey bud, slight change of plans for Chicago. Since your brothers are going to be home that weekend, I thought it would be nice to invite them along too. Got 2 more tickets. We'll make it a real family thing." I tried to act cool about it, but Uncle Mark knows me too well. He could tell I was upset. "What's wrong? I thought you'd be happy to have your brothers along." What could I say? No, actually, I hate them, and I wanted this one special thing to be just for me because they get everything and I get nothing. So I just shrugged and mumbled something about it being fine. Uncle Mark gave me that look adults give when they think they understand, but they really don't. I know you guys aren't always close, but this could be a good chance to bond. And it wouldn't be fair to leave them out, right? Fair? Are you kidding me? My brothers get to go on multiple vacations every year with their dad so many places I've never been, because we can't afford it. This basketball trip was going to be the one thing that was just for me, the one special thing I had, and now they were taking that too. That night, I seriously thought about telling Uncle Mark one didn't want to go anymore. I figured if I couldn't have this one thing to myself, then what was the point? Why let my brothers invade the one good relationship I had? But then I realized if I stayed home, I'd just be screwing myself over. They'd still get to go to the game and all their trips with their dad. I'd end up with nothing again. Plus, Uncle Mark and I are tight. I didn't want to mess that up by being a whiny little brat about the whole thing. And honestly, I didn't want to make things even worse with my brothers either. It's not like it's their fault their dad isn't a complete loser like mine. So I decided to suck it up and go. I didn't say anything else about it to Uncle Mark. I just pretended I was cool with everything. The night before we left, my mom did her usual thing, totally checked out. She was supposed to help me pack. I've never been on a trip like this before, but she was too busy texting her new boyfriend. This guy, Rick or Dick or whatever his name is, has been around for like 2 months, and already my mom acts like he's the center of the universe. He's not even that great, just some dude who works at the car dealership and thinks he's hot stuff because he wears expensive watches. But whatever, that's a whole other story. So I'm in my room, trying to figure out what to pack for Chicago, and Liam walks by. He stops at my door, which is weird because he usually pretends my room doesn't exist. "You need help?" he asks, looking at the mess on my bed. I'm not going to lie. I was confused. Liam doesn't just offer to help me with stuff, but I also had no idea what I was doing, so I said, yeah, he actually gave me some solid advice about layers and stuff, even let me borrow his decent hoodie. The whole time, I kept waiting for the joke, for him to laugh and say, psych, or something, but he didn't. He was just nice. When he left, I called my friend Max to tell him about it. Dude, something weird is happening, I said. My brothers are being nice to me. Max laughed. Maybe they got body snatched. Or maybe they finally realized what jerks they've been. I didn't think it was either of those things, but I couldn't figure out what their angle was. People don't just change overnight, especially not my brothers. The next morning, we all piled into Uncle Mark's SUV to drive to the airport. My brothers were acting all excited about the trip, asking Uncle Mark questions about Chicago, talking about the basketball game like they actually gave a damn. I just sat there, watching them, trying to figure out what their deal was. At the airport, I was nervous as hell because I'd never flown before. I didn't want to look like a scared little kid in front of my brothers. But when we started taking off, I grabbed the armrest so hard my knuckles ached. Noah, who was sitting next to me, actually noticed. "First flight?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without my voice cracking. "Don't worry about it," he said. "Takeoff and landing are the only scary parts. Just pop your ears like this." He showed me how to yawn to make my ears pop. I still don't know why, but that little moment kind of got to me. Noah had never bothered to teach me anything before. When we got to Chicago, we checked into this nice hotel. Uncle Mark had booked 2 rooms, him in one and the 4 of us boys in the other. Liam immediately said, "I'll bunk with the kid," meaning me. Again, weird. Usually, they'd arrange things so I was the odd one out. That first night, we just walked around the city a bit and got deep dish pizza. My brothers kept including me in their conversations, asking my opinion, actually listening when I talked. It was freaking me out, honestly, but also it felt kind of good. Back at the hotel, I finally got up the courage to ask Liam what was going on. "What do you mean?" he said, pretending to be confused. "You know what I mean," I said. "You guys are being weird." "Nice." "You're never nice to me." Liam had the decency to look a little embarrassed. "Yeah, well, we've been thinking. Noah and I are heading to college soon. Maybe it's time we stopped being such dicks to our little brother." I didn't buy it for a second, but I also didn't want to ruin whatever was happening. If they wanted to play nice brothers for a weekend, fine by me. The next day was game day. We got to the arena early so we could watch warm-ups, and I was geeking out over seeing my favorite players up close. My brothers were actually asking me questions about the players and the game, and I found myself explaining stuff to them. It felt good, like, for once, I knew something they didn't. That's when the thing with the food line happened. I was standing in line to get nachos, and I didn't realize I'd cut in front of some people. This big dude with a beard started yelling at me, calling me a disrespectful little punk and saying I needed to learn some manners. I was trying to apologize, but the dude was getting in my face, and I started to panic a little. Then, out of nowhere, Liam was there, stepping between me and the guy. "Back off," Liam said, his voice all calm but with this edge to it. He apologized. He didn't see the line. "Your brother needs to learn some respect," the guy said, not backing down. That's when Liam got right in the guy's face. "If you say another word to my little brother, we're going to have a problem." The guy must have seen something in Liam's eyes because he finally backed off, muttering something under his breath. I was in shock. Liam had called me his little brother, not half-brother or that kid I live with, and he'd stood up for me against an adult. I'd never seen that side of him before. After the guy left, Liam turned to me. "You good?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Don't worry about jerks like that," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "That's what brothers are for, right?" I wanted to believe him. I really did. But there was still this voice in the back of my head, saying it was all too good to be true. When we got back to our seats with the food, Noah and Owen were pissed when they heard what happened. "You should have called us over," Noah said. "We would have backed you up. Next time someone messes with you, just point them out," Owen added. "We'll handle it." Uncle Mark caught the tail end of this conversation and smiled. "Good to see you boys looking out for each other," he said. The way my brothers preened at his approval, something about it seemed off. But I was still riding the high of having my brothers actually defend me for once, so I pushed that thought away. The game was awesome. My team won on a buzzer beater, and we were all jumping around and high-fiving like crazy. For a moment, it felt like we were a real family, like I was with them. Back at the hotel that night, Liam and I stayed up late talking not about anything special, just stuff, school, sports, movies we liked. He asked me about my friends, what I was into besides basketball. No one in my family had ever asked me stuff like that. "You know," he said as we were about to go to sleep, "I'm sorry we haven't been better brothers to you." I didn't know what to say to that. "No, seriously," he continued. "Dad always made it seem like I don't know, like you weren't really part of the family. But that's nonsense. You're our brother. Half," I corrected automatically. "No," he said firmly. "Just brother." The half thing doesn't matter. That night, lying there in the dark in a hotel room in Chicago, I let myself believe it. I let myself imagine what it would be like if they really meant it, if they really saw me as their brother from now on. The rest of our trip was actually awesome. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but my brothers kept being cool the whole time. We went to Navy Pier the day after the game, and they didn't ditch me once. Noah even took a bunch of pics of me for my Instagram, which is something he'd normally make fun of me for. When we got back home, I figured everything would go back to normal. You know how families are on vacation. Everyone's chill and gets along. Then you get home and start hating each other again in like 2 seconds. But that's not what happened. The first day back at school, Noah actually gave me a ride instead of making me take the bus. When he dropped me off, he said, "Text me when you're done with basketball practice. I'll come get you." I was so shocked, I just nodded like an idiot. Noah had never offered to pick me up from practice before usually. I had to beg my mom or take the late bus. At lunch that day, my friend Max noticed something was up. "Dude, what's with the stupid grin?" he asked while shoving fries in his face. "My brothers are being nice," I said. "Like, suspiciously nice. Didn't you say they were being nice before the trip too?" Max asked. "Maybe they finally realized they've been jerks all these years." I shrugged. "Maybe. But people don't just change like that, especially not my brothers." "Maybe your uncle said something to them," Max suggested. "Like, threatened to cut them out of his will or something if they didn't start being nice to you." I laughed, but honestly, that made more sense than them suddenly growing consciences. A couple of days later, I was at Uncle Mark's place. It wasn't our usual hangout day, but my mom was working late, and asked if he could have me for dinner. Uncle Mark makes this amazing chicken parmesan that I freaking love, so I was pumped. After dinner, I needed to finish some homework, so Uncle Mark let me use his computer in his home office. He said he needed to make some calls anyway, so I had the office to myself. I finished my math homework pretty quick, but then got distracted checking my socials. As I was closing tabs, I noticed that Uncle Mark hadn't closed out of his email. I wasn't trying to snoop, but a subject line caught my eye: Tech Ventures Summer Internship Program, Final Selection Committee. I probably should have just closed it, but Uncle Mark had never mentioned anything about internships to me, and I was curious. So I clicked. The email was from some big tech company, like Major Big, and from what I could tell, Uncle Mark wasn't just involved with them. He was some kind of big shot consultant who had a say in selecting people for their internship program. The email mentioned something about your allocation of spots and asked him to finalize your recommendations for the summer cohort. At the bottom of the email was some info about the program: full paid internships for students entering college, fast track to future employment, connections with industry leaders. Holy crap, this was like a golden ticket kind of opportunity. I closed the email, feeling guilty for snooping, but my mind was racing. Uncle Mark had never mentioned he had this kind of pull at a major tech company. I mean, I knew he did something in tech and made good money, but this seemed next level. I finished up my homework, and Uncle Mark drove me home. As we were pulling up to my house, he asked, "Everything good with you and your brothers? Seems like you guys are getting along better." "Yeah," I said. "They've been different since Chicago." "In a good way," he smiled. "I'm glad to hear it. Family's important, kid. The older you get, the more you realize that." I nodded, but something about the way he said it made me wonder if he'd said something to my brothers. Had he been the reason for their sudden change? I walked in and caught Liam and Noah mid-convo. They went quiet real fast. Noah asked, "How was dinner?" I said, "Fine. Chicken parm." Liam acted all casual, asking what we talked about. I said, "Nothing much. School. The Bulls game." Then Noah dropped the real question. "Did Uncle Mark mention work?" That's when it clicked, the sudden niceness, the interest in my uncle. They knew about the internships. I played dumb, said, "Uncle Mark never talks work with me." They exchanged that look, the one that said they were fishing for info. Liam claimed their dad mentioned internships, and they were figuring out summer plans. And just like that, I knew why they'd been playing nice. I mumbled something about being tired and dipped to my room. I needed to think. I texted Max, found out why my brothers are being nice. Uncle Mark has pull with some fancy tech internship program, and they want in. Max texted back almost immediately, LMAO, that makes way more sense than them growing consciences. I laughed, but honestly, it hurt. For a week, I'd let myself believe they actually wanted to be my brothers, that they cared about me. But it was all fake. They were just using me to get to Uncle Mark. The next day at school, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept thinking about my brothers and how fake they'd been. By the time Noah picked me up, I'd worked myself into a pretty bad mood. "What crawled up your ass?" Noah asked as I got in the car, slamming the door harder than necessary. "Nothing," I muttered. "You pissed about something?" "Why do you care?" I snapped. Noah looked surprised. "Whoa, chill. Just asking." I almost called him out right then, almost said, "I know you're just using me to get to Uncle Mark," but something stopped me. Maybe I wanted to see how far they'd go with this act. Or maybe part of me was hoping I was wrong. When we got home, Owen had already made nachos and offered me some, which was a first. As we ate, my phone buzzed Uncle Mark asking if I wanted to come to the Bulls game next week. I texted back a quick yes. Noah glanced at my phone and casually asked if it was Uncle Mark. I nodded, mentioning the game. The look between Noah and Owen was almost laughable. They were clearly interested. Owen asked if it was just me and Uncle Mark, and I shrugged. Noah then suggested that if there were extra tickets, he and Liam had never been to a pro game. They didn't even wait a full day to start angling for an invite. I said I'd ask, my voice sounding as fake as theirs. Noah slapped my back, calling me bro first, but now I knew why. I went to my room and locked the door. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to expose them right away, tell Uncle Mark everything. But another part of me wanted to see how far they'd go, how much they'd fake caring about me just to get what they wanted. I decided to wait and see, to play along for a bit and gather more evidence. Because if I was going to blow up my relationship with my brothers, not that we had much of one to begin with, I wanted to be damn sure I was right. The next few days were weird as hell. I was basically playing a part, pretending I didn't know my brothers were using me, and they were playing their parts too, pretending they actually gave a damn about me. It was like we were all in some crappy school play, except I was the only one who knew it was fake. Then, one day after school, my brother's dad texted me. That was a first. He never texted me. Ever. The message said, "Hey Jake, it's Tom. Wondering if you wanted to come over for dinner tomorrow night with the boys? Been too long since we had you over. Never been too long, try never." I'd never been invited to dinner at their dad's place. I showed the text to Max at lunch, and he laughed, saying they were really going all in. I asked if I should go. He was all for it, calling it my own personal reality show. So I texted back saying I'd come, and Tom replied with a thumbs up saying he'd pick me up at 6. When I told my mom, she seemed surprised but happy, mentioning how Tom had never invited me before. I pointed out the weird timing, but it went over her head like usual. Tom pulled up in his Audi, dressed sharp like he came straight from work. He greeted me like we were old friends, saying the boys were excited I was coming. I gave him a flat response, but he didn't seem to notice. The whole drive, he asked about school, basketball, my friends' stuff he'd never cared about before. His house was huge, with my brother's rooms way cooler than anything at our place. After dinner, Tom told the boys to show me around while he made some calls. As soon as he left, the fake niceness dropped. They showed me around like they had to, not because they wanted to. The basement was insane, like something out of MTV Cribs. After a while, Liam asked if I was going to the Bulls game with Uncle Mark. I said, yeah. Noah asked if Uncle Mark was cool with them coming, and I told him Uncle Mark said he'd get extra tickets. They exchanged a quick look before Liam casually asked me if Uncle Mark talked about his work much, saying their dad mentioned he was doing really well, and there it was fishing for info. I kept it vague and asked him why the sudden interest in our uncle. Just curious, Liam said. Dad mentioned he's got some connections. Might be helpful for college and stuff. What kind of connections? I asked, playing dumb. Noah jumped in. I guess he works with some big tech companies. Dad says he might be able to help us get internships this summer before we start college. Huh, I said. He's never mentioned anything like that to me. Really? Liam looked genuinely surprised. I figured he'd have talked to you about it since you guys are so close. I shrugged. Maybe he doesn't think I'd be interested in tech stuff. Well, if he ever does bring it up, Noah said, you could mention that we're really into tech. Both of us are thinking about computer science majors. Since when? Last I heard, Liam wanted to do business, and Noah was undecided. But I just nodded. Sure, I'll mention it if it comes up. Liam gave me a fist bump. We owe you one, bro. They owe me one for helping them use my uncle. The audacity of these guys. We played pool for a while, and I have to admit, it was kind of fun. Owen taught me some shots, and for a little while, I almost forgot that none of this was real. When I got home, Mom asked how it went. I said it was fine. Their house was nice. She got a little bitter, saying Tom did well for himself, then added she was glad he was finally including me. Said it must have been hard watching my brothers get so much while I didn't. I just shrugged it off, not wanting to get into it. The next day at school, I texted Uncle Mark, saying I needed help with a science project, just an excuse to talk without my brothers around. He replied right away, inviting me for dinner at 6:00 after school. I told my brothers I was going to a friend's place and took the bus to Uncle Mark's apartment. We chatted about random stuff for a while, until I finally asked what he actually did for work. He looked surprised, asking why the sudden interest, and I shrugged, playing it casual, saying I only knew it was tech-related but nothing more. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. Well, I'm a consultant for several tech companies. I advise them on product development, market strategy, that kind of thing. Is Tech Ventures one of the companies you work with? I asked, watching his reaction carefully. His eyebrows shot up. How do you know about Tech Ventures? Busted. I could feel my face getting hot. I saw an email on your computer the other day when I was doing homework. I wasn't snooping, I swear. It was just open, and I noticed it. Uncle Mark didn't look mad, just curious. What exactly did you see? Something about an internship program and a selection committee. He nodded slowly. Yes, I help coordinate their summer internship program. It's very competitive. Why? Are you interested in tech? Because you're still a few years too young for… No, not for me, I interrupted. My brothers. They've been asking about your work a lot, and suddenly they're super interested in tech careers. Uncle Mark leaned back in his chair, a knowing look crossing his face. Ah, and I'm guessing this new interest coincides with them suddenly being nicer to you? You noticed? I asked, relieved that I wasn't imagining things. Kid, I've known you your whole life. You think I didn't notice how things changed after Chicago? How your brothers went from barely acknowledging you to suddenly wanting to hang out all the time. He shook his head. I just thought maybe they'd finally grown up a little. But you're saying there's more to it? That's when I finally took a deep breath and told him everything about finding the email, about my brothers fishing for information, about dinner at their dad's house. When I finished, Uncle Mark was quiet for a long time. He apologized, saying I deserved better. I asked if we should confront them, but he suggested waiting to see how far they'd take it, given how valuable the Tech Ventures internships were. When I asked if we were setting a trap, he grinned and asked if I was up for it. I felt in control and said, absolutely. We spent the next hour coming up with a plan. Uncle Mark would casually mention the internships at the Bulls game, pretend he'd just found out about my brother's interest in tech. He'd act impressed, say he might be able to help. Then we'd see what happened next. As I was leaving, Uncle Mark put his hand on my shoulder. Jake, I want you to know something. No matter what happens with your brothers, you'll always have me in your corner. Got it? I nodded, a lump in my throat. At least one person in my life was real. The night of the Bulls game arrived, and I was a mix of excited and nervous. Uncle Mark picked us all up in his SUV. My brothers were practically kissing his ass the whole ride downtown, asking him questions about his job, the tech industry, his opinions on crypto and AI, and all this other stuff they'd clearly just Googled to sound smart. As we parked, Liam mentioned their dad said Uncle Mark worked with big tech companies. Uncle Mark said he did consulting. Noah chimed in, claiming they were into tech and that Liam had been coding since 12. I almost laughed. Liam had never coded in his life. Uncle Mark glanced at me, surprised, and asked about Liam's programming. Liam smoothly lied, saying he started with Python, moved to Java, and was now learning C++. Total nonsense. The closest Liam had ever come to coding was setting up his Instagram account. Well, that's great, Uncle Mark said. Actually, one of the companies I work with has an amazing internship program for incoming college freshmen. Very competitive, though. The car went dead silent for a second, like my brothers couldn't believe. Uncle Mark had brought it up himself. Oh, really? Noah tried to sound casual and failed miserably. That sounds cool. Very cool, Uncle Mark said. They only take about 10 students each summer, but those who get in are practically guaranteed jobs after graduation, 6-figure starting salaries, stock options, the works. My brothers were practically drooling. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Wow, Liam said. That sounds amazing. It is, Uncle Mark agreed. And actually, I help run the selection committee, and there it was, the bomb dropped. My brother's eyes practically bugged out of their heads. You do? Noah stammered. Yep, Uncle Mark said, turning off the car. But hey, we can talk about that later. Let's go watch some basketball. As we walked to the arena, Liam and Noah kept exchanging these frantic looks, like they couldn't believe their luck. Owen just looked confused, like he wasn't fully in on the plan. The game was close the whole time, with the Bulls just barely winning in the last minute. I was going crazy cheering, and for once, my brothers seemed genuinely into it too. Maybe they were just high on the idea of those internships. After the game, Uncle Mark suggested we grab some food. We found this pizza place nearby that was still open, and while we were waiting for our food, Uncle Mark brought up the internships again. So, Liam, Noah, I'm curious, he said. What exactly interests you about tech? What kind of careers are you hoping for? They started throwing around tech buzzwords, but it was obvious to me. They had no clue what they were talking about. Uncle Mark played along, asking questions, then casually offered to help with their Tech Ventures internship applications, suggesting they come over that weekend to review the process and polish their resumes. Noah eagerly agreed. Then Owen surprisingly asked, should Jake come too? Bless his heart, it was the perfect move, putting my brothers in an awkward spot. Uncle Mark smoothly agreed, saying it was never too early for me to get interested in tech. Liam and Noah both forced smiles, but I could tell they were annoyed. Too bad jerks. When Uncle Mark dropped us off at home, my brothers were practically floating. As soon as we got inside, they started talking about the internships, completely forgetting I was there. Dad's going to flip when he hears this, Noah said. Uncle Mark basically offered us the internships. Not yet, Liam cautioned. We still need to seal the deal this weekend. Make sure we look good on paper. What about the other stuff Dad mentioned? Owen asked. About making sure Uncle Mark thinks we're good brothers to Jake? I froze in the hallway, listening. This was exactly what I'd been waiting to hear. That's handled, Liam said dismissively. The kid's totally buying it. Did you see him at the game? He thinks we're best friends now. It's almost too easy, Noah laughed. All we had to do was pretend to give a damn about him for a few weeks, and now we're getting six-figure jobs handed to us. I still feel kind of bad, Owen said, and I felt a tiny spark of hope. At least one of them had a conscience. Don't, Liam said flatly. It's not like we're hurting him. He gets to hang out with his cool older brothers for a while. We get the internships, everybody wins. I'd heard enough. I slipped back outside and closed the front door loudly, like I was just coming in. The conversation in the kitchen stopped immediately. Forgot my phone in the car? I called out, pretending I hadn't been eavesdropping, then went straight to my room and texted Uncle Mark. You were right. They're totally using me to get to you. Just heard them talking about it. He texted back almost immediately. I'm sorry, kid. But now we know for sure. Still want to go through with the plan? I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. The next day, Tom called Uncle Mark one no because Uncle Mark told me later. Apparently, he just wanted to catch up with his old friend and happened to mention how excited the boys were about the possibility of internships. Uncle Mark played along, said he'd be happy to help, asked if Tom wanted to come to the meeting on Saturday too. Tom showed up at Uncle Mark's apartment before we even got there on Saturday. When Uncle Mark answered the door with us behind him, Tom looked surprised to see me inside. Uncle Mark had set up his dining room table with laptops and papers. It looked very official. So, he said, once we were all seated, let's talk about what Tech Ventures is looking for in their interns. For the next hour, he went over all these requirements and qualifications that sounded impressive, but that I'm pretty sure he was making up on the spot. My brothers and their dad were taking notes frantically, nodding along, asking questions. Finally, Uncle Mark said, of course, there's one more factor that's very important to Tech Ventures, character. The room got quiet. Character? Tom repeated. Yes, Uncle Mark said seriously. Tech Ventures prides itself on only bringing in people with strong ethical standards, honesty, integrity, that sort of thing. My brothers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. In fact, Uncle Mark continued, the final round of the selection process includes character references and a situational judgment test designed to assess ethical decision-making. I'm sure the boys will do fine with that, Tom said quickly. They've been raised with strong values. I'm glad to hear it, Uncle Mark said, because I've actually already mentioned Liam and Noah to the committee. They seemed very interested. My brothers perked up at this. Really? Liam couldn't hide his excitement. Yes, Uncle Mark said. I told them how you two have been such wonderful brothers to Jake recently, how you've really stepped up, included him, looked out for him. That kind of family loyalty really impressed them. Tom's face froze. My brothers looked like they were going to be sick. In fact, Uncle Mark went on, they suggested bringing Jake to the final interviews. They thought it would be nice to hear directly from him about what great brothers you've been all these years. The room was dead silent. All these years? Noah repeated weakly. Of course, Uncle Mark said, his face perfectly innocent. Jake tells me you guys have always been close, always included him in family activities, trips, that sort of thing. Tom cleared his throat. Well, actually, Dave, the boys have had their own relationship with Jake. It's been complicated. Uncle Mark raised his eyebrows. How so? No one spoke. I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to figure out how to explain years of ignoring me without sounding like complete jerks. Just normal brother stuff, Liam finally said. You know, ups and downs. I see, Uncle Mark said. Jake, would you agree with that? All eyes turned to me. This was my moment. I could expose them right then. Tell Uncle Mark how they'd ignored me for years, how they were only being nice to get the internships. But looking at their faces, especially Owen's, who looked genuinely ashamed, I decided to take a different approach. Yeah, normal brother stuff, I said with a shrug. It's not like they invite me on trips with their dad or anything, but whatever. The room got even quieter, if that was possible. Trips? Uncle Mark asked, looking at Tom. You take the boys on trips but not Jake? Tom's face reddened. Well, you know, Dave, Jake isn't technically I'm aware of whose biological son he is. Uncle Mark cut him off. I'm just surprised that in all these years, you've never included him even once. Tom had no answer for that. Uncle Mark stood up, said the meeting had been eye-opening, and headed to his office to make some calls, leaving us sitting there in total awkward silence. The second his door shut, Tom turned on me, all pissed. What the hell was that about? I just shrugged and said, I told the truth. Sorry if it ruined their plans. He started to snap, but Liam cut him off, reminding him Uncle Mark could come back any second. Tom took a breath and tried to play it cool, saying the internships were important and he didn't want any misunderstandings messing things up. I shot back, asking if he meant like ignoring me for 15 years or only pretending to care once they found out. Uncle Mark could help them. I straight up told them I heard their little post-game talk about how easy it was to fake caring. Owen looked like he might cry, but I didn't give him the chance. Then I dropped the bomb. I stood up and told them Uncle Mark and I already knew everything. And this whole meeting was a setup to see just how far they'd go. The look on their faces almost made all those years of being ignored worth it. The look on their faces when they realized that we'd set them up? Priceless! Tom turned purple. Liam and Noah looked like they were going to lose it. Only Owen had the decency to look ashamed. Uncle Mark walked back in, cool as ice. So, shall we continue discussing those internships? What happened next was brutal. Uncle Mark denied them the internships. He literally destroyed them. Turns out, he'd recorded everything their fake tech talk, Tom pushing for connections, and them admitting they were using me. Uncle Mark casually said the recordings would interest the Tech Ventures board since they take ethics seriously. Tom exploded, calling it blackmail. Uncle Mark just laughed, saying it was just facts, actions have consequences. Tom turned on me, blaming me for ruining things. I shot back that I was done being used. Liam tried to explain, but Uncle Mark shut him down, saying they were disqualified and he'd be informing other companies too. Noah lost it, claiming their futures were being ruined over not being best buddies with me. Uncle Mark stayed cold, saying they were being held accountable for trying to cheat their way into jobs, then told them to get out. Tom practically dragged Owen, who glanced back at me. I almost felt bad for him. The next week was nuclear fallout. My mom finally grew a spine when she found out what happened. She and Tom had the fight to end all fights. My brothers wouldn't even look at me at school. They told everyone I was a backstabbing psycho who ruined their lives. Whatever. What goes around comes around. 2 weeks later, Uncle Mark came through with the biggest surprise. He'd been watching me help with those youth basketball kids and thought I had potential. He pulled some strings and got me into this elite basketball camp over the summer, the kind that college scouts attend. Liam and Noah basically disowned me after that. Fine by me? Owen still tries to talk sometimes, but I shut that down quick. Too little, too late. Tom and my mom split up a month later. My brothers moved to their dads permanently. Mom and I got the house, plus child support that Tom now pays for me too, thanks to Uncle Mark's lawyer friend. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far with the revenge. Then I remember 15 years of being treated like I didn't exist. And I think, nah, they got exactly what they deserved. Life's not perfect, Mom's still a mess half the time. I still have days where I feel alone, but at least now I know my worth. I'm nobody's stepping stone, and that's a lesson worth learning, even if I had to burn every bridge to do it.